talk about the FCC for a moment. Today, Ajit Pai is going to announce plans, if he hasn't already by the time you hear the sound of my voice or by the time I am speaking, because the plan was to do so today. And let me just back up for a moment, just give you some of Ajit Pai's greatest hits in the past couple of days. Literally the past couple of days. The FCC has voted along party lines to reform the low-income Lifeline broadband subsidy program, because there's nothing more annoying than low-income people having access to broadband. Among the most contentious items are a proposal to tighten eligibility requirements and cap spending, another to halt subsidies through internet resellers. The proposal could force over 70% of Lifeline enrollees to seek a new provider. Many would have no option at all. It gives low-income households a $9.25 monthly credit towards discounted home internet service from 900 participating companies. Until last year, that could only be applied to landline and mobile voice service. But former FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler expanded the program to broadband early last year. Pai scrapped the directive that came at the end of Wheeler's tenure that allowed 9 new companies to participate. So a lot of Native Americans apparently will be the first screwed through this thing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Look at Big Sky. Get
Meanwhile,
off the big screen.
Days ago, the FCC changed their media ownership rules. Broadcasters will be allowed to combine with newspaper in the same market, and could be allowed to own up to 2 of the top 4 stations in a city. This is a new rule, which passed in a 3-2 vote. It may be challenged in court, but if they survive, they will mark the most significant changes to media ownership regulations in a generation. FCC is also looking at whether or not to allow Sinclair Media, as we've talked about multiple times on this program, to gain control over 233 stations by merging with Tribune Media. They would give them a reach of 72% of the country. The rule that most people are familiar with is one that limits a single company's reach of media outlets to about 35% of the country. However, they're going to claim that because some of these stations have numbers like 27 or 38 or 56, I'm just naming the UHF numbers that I grew up with, that they're not fully, they should not count as full-size stations. Now, of course, this is ridiculous because the vast majority of people, the overwhelming majority of people in this country get their television via cable. So it doesn't make a difference if it's Channel 4, which was a VHF station, versus Channel 27, which is a UHF station. That was relevant 20 years ago. It is not relevant, and maybe it wasn't even relevant 20 years ago. So that takes us up to this week, where Pai will, the primary thing is, of course, as you remember from the net neutrality fight, initially the internet was considered a Title II classification, which meant that it was a common carrier, which meant that the FCC had the ability, had more jurisdiction to regulate the internet as a common carrier with certain principles, because if it's a common carrier, that means that everybody needs it. Therefore, the FCC has more of an ability to regulate it, which means that the FCC could say to a Comcast, look, you provide the cable for Sam Seder's house, and you also have a music service. You cannot throttle Spotify because you want to promote your music service. In fact, you also can't charge Spotify an increased rate that Spotify is going to have to pass on to Sam Seder because you own the pipes. That's not appropriate, and that is, it's anti-competitive. It's bad for consumers. It's bad for everybody. Under the Bush administration, Colin Powell's son, who completely, by just sheer coincidence, was appointed to the FCC by George Bush, reversed these classifications, made the internet a Title I classification, and in every attempt after that the FCC had to regulate the internet, the courts shut down the FCC because they didn't have the authority anymore. And the courts kept saying to him, look, you can do this if you want to do it. Just revert back to a classification, Title II classification. Well, under Tom Wheeler, as much as he didn't seem to want to, there was an enormous amount of pressure exerted on Wheeler and Barack Obama because Obama had promised net neutrality. There was a tremendous, I think they got over 3 million comments when they were debating this at the FCC. And we won that fight. The internet was classified as a common carrier. Net neutrality rules were put in place. Court cases were resolved. End of story. But not quite. Because Ajit Pai just announced today how the FCC can save the open internet. I'm not going to read it because it's a bunch of lies. It's a bunch of lies. It's a bunch of lies. And it will wipe out net neutrality. Is it reversible? Yes, I guess theoretically we could keep going back and forth. I hope if the Democrats ever take Congress that they just make this a law. I would put that on the list. They're also basically going to dole out some of their authority to the Federal Trade Commission to police whether or not internet service providers are acting in an anti-competitive manner. And, of course, then that takes us to antitrust law and interpretation in this country, which since the era of Bork has been largely just a very narrow perspective on price. And I also imagine the FTC is one of those classically underfunded agencies. So net neutrality will be the next on the scrap heap, and then who knows what Ajit Pai will be up to going forward.
Someone called Baked Alaska.
Yeah, exactly.
On the case.
He was super upset about this the other day. Boy, when he finds out about this, he's going to do another 40-hour, In-N-Out burger video about how upset he is.
Isn't it a little messed up that an Indian guy runs the FCC?
Yeah, right.
That's the angle.
I feel proud of myself about that.
There you go.
Wow.
I
was holding it back.
Unprompted.
I was trying. It was totally unprompted, totally spontaneous.
Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos